Well, good afternoon. If it's Tuesday, 12:30 Eastern Time, it's time for Tuesday's Tips with Michael live here from the StreamYard studio, home office. Kind of nice out here this week, a little less chilly, a little less snow for those you've gotten dumped on in the Northeast. Thinking about you. Got family, friends up there. So hoping you're surviving. Hoping you're surviving. As I mentioned last week, at the end of our session last week, over the next few weeks, 7 or 8 weeks, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, agility, Agile EQ, one of the assessments that we use in our training programs given to us by Wiley. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But I wanted to start, kind of set the stage today about this whole emotional intelligence, agility, being agile, and the EQ thing. So, and I do a lot of this with leaders because a lot of leaders I work with, for some reason, are stuck in thinking through the emotional, intelligent needs of the situation they're in, whether that situation is at the one-on-one level, at the small group level, at the large group level, or at the organizational level. Understanding the emotional needs of a situation is very, very important for you to be a successful leader. I'm just going to start off with a little bit of a quote here. Emotional intelligence is about having the ability and the agility to read the interpersonal and emotional needs of a situation or with a team member or with a group and to respond accordingly. What are the emotional needs of that? So I'm going to start a little bit of old school because it's kind of where I start with things a lot of times. So let's think about 40 years ago, 1980, even before that, late 70s, early 80s, maybe mid 80s. As we were doing leadership development, working with leaders, leaders would tell us, Michael, I want my employees to leave their feelings at home. This is a workplace. I want them to bring their skills. I want them to bring their competencies. I want them to bring their get the job done attitude to work every day. And this whole touchy-feely emotional stuff for somebody else. They can talk to whoever they want to talk about in HR about it, but we're here to work, right? Leave all that fuzzy stuff at home. And that kind of did itself in probably the 70s and 80s and maybe even late 80s, early 90s. Basically, employees were there to follow orders. And here in the Northern Virginia area, since we have such a military presence, kind of persuasive here because of the Pentagon and all the folks who work in the military, they're used to working for folks who either give orders or take orders. And a lot of folks brought that mentality into the workplace. I tell my employees what to do and they do it. They like doing it, their problem, not mine. Obviously, things change. I would say probably in the early 2000s to 2010, like businesses started to become more creative, employees needed to bring that creativity and those feelings about things to work. And a lot of places became more sensitive to those feelings at work. And a lot of leaders tuned into that and said, okay, how are my employees feeling about the work they're doing right now? Are they excited about doing the work they're doing right now? Are they sad about doing the work they're doing right now? Do they have better ideas? I'm just not asking them for those ideas. But leaders, we probably knew a lot of them back in the 80s and 90s that were, really starting to come into tune with how their employees feel about the company, about the work. Now, as we get into the 2010 to now, more project teams are coming together. And more project teams are coming together. They're coming together on the fly. So again, old school was I'm in the accounting department. I have my 3 accounting colleagues. We sit here all the time. And, this is how we get work done. And we're all working together. And that's great. My boss comes in once a day, a couple of times a day, checks in on everybody. Everybody goes back to work. Well, those kind of days, there are organizations that work that way. But a lot of organizations we work with, everyone's in project teams all the time. Right. And so meeting the emotional needs of a team as a leader changes all the time. It's dynamic. You can get into one situation and your group's going to need certain things. You're going to get into another situation and your group's going to need other things. So what is the best approach for you to use in those different situations? So over the next 8 weeks, we're going to talk about what we call the Agile EQ model. There are 8 emotional intelligent needs, or at least approaches to those needs that we're going to talk about over the next 8 weeks. We're going to spend now 5 minutes each Tuesday going through a deeper dive of each of these. And when would be the appropriate time to use each one based on the needs of the situation. And these are what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about being dynamic, talk about being outgoing, talk about being empathizing, talk about being receptive, composed, objective, resolute, and self-assured. All 8 that are on the everything disc map. And depending on where your dot is on that map, you obviously do certain of those very well. It's those others I tend to worry about when I work with leaders. When I work with leaders with this assessment, we look at their quadrant, we look at their 3 strengths when it comes to the EQ mindsets. They do them really well. They're comfortable doing them. It's kind of their GPS position. It's the other 5 I worry about. It's the other side of the circle. Are they meeting the emotional needs of their groups outside of their comfort zone? And how do I, as a leader, adapt to meet those emotional needs at that particular moment with that particular group? So that is what we're going to be talking about over the next 8 weeks. We're going to start with dynamic next week. We'll talk about when to use it, how to use it, when it's important, and specifically, what situations as a leader do you need to be dynamic? And what situations maybe it's not the appropriate approach. So that is what we're going to start next week. As always, this is Tuesday's Tips with Michael live. If you're seeing this for the first time, please give us a like, give us a follow. Let us know what you think. I do take questions from my audience from time to time. So if you got a question, send in a question and we'll talk about it. Have a great rest of your day and a great week. See you next Tuesday.